This is like my second time recording this video, so uh, forgive me if I am a little. I didn't get mic audio. Um. Anyway, let's just get into it. So a good place to start with writing is just to think about what is satisfying to listen to, especially in this genre. And so what I do, play around with intervals, play around with timing. And I'm not saying you have to do like mixed meter or anything like that, like analysis leaders. I'm just saying like if you delay the satisfying part, it's more satisfying. That's all I'm trying to say, right? So in this genre, attention is like a big thing, and we like to play around with octaves. So like if you do a lot of stuff with ninths or octaves or sevenths, like anything around the top of the scale, it's gonna be tense. Even octaves are tense to an extent because they're neutral intervals, and if you put like ninths and shit around it, it'll just sound tense, right? So let's start with the guitar part here. So as you can see, I'm playing around with sevenths. This starts in a major E type thing. This whole song is pretty major, but this breakdown starts major, and then we kind of transition to minor, and then like a Phrygian type thing, right? The way you can get there, switching modes isn't that hard, because especially in if you're doing it like this, like the major seventh interval is in the harmonic minor scale, and the harmonic minor scale is low-key just the minor scale. Like no one really uses natural minor like that, or at least rarely they use it. It's usually always harmonic or melodic minor. But because of that, you can throw like a minor third in pretty easily, and then you can just kind of go anywhere from there. This is in drop D sharp, so F sharp is the third. That's where this is going. This idea repeats kind of for a little bit. It repeats that many times. And then here, you'll see me start to introduce the F sharp. So we're very obviously in minor right now. So like mapping out what changes you want is pretty helpful, obviously. Because you know what you got to do. You just got to do it at that point. So I know that I wanted, this is a fade out breakdown as well. So I know I wanted to end in like a Phrygian type thing, and I had to just get there. And especially in like this style, this is like semi animals as leader, semi sleep token. Sleep tokens breakdowns are the reason they do fade out so much is because they're really repetitive and they're already developed, if that makes sense. And so the nice thing about writing stuff like that is once you get to where you're going, that's it. You just go, like, you just keep going. And to get there, you don't really have to change that much. So, like, going from that major thing and then adding F sharp and then just going for the Phrygian, like, I literally just go for it after I modulate. And that's it. That's all you. The best advice I can give is to not think about it too much. I talked a lot about the notes I used. Now, what I mean by timing and the satisfying part, the low note, for all intents and purposes, is the satisfying part. I'm sure most people would agree with that in this genre. And so, delaying when the low note impact feels the best is like a pretty solid trick. So the way you do that is actually in the drums more so than the guitar. So let's go to the drums. So that's the whole drum part for the breakdown. It's pretty repetitive. That's by design. Um, the main thing you'll notice that's repeating is the downbeat hit, and then a hit on the fourth beat of that measure. The fourth beat is what makes this satisfying. You're kind of expecting the downbeat to hit, but you're not expecting beat 4. Even when it's repetitive, like you still notice it. It's repetitive and you notice it, and so it's it's compelling enough. You know, I'm not trying to say it's the most compelling thing ever, but like it works. And if you listen to this with the guitar, so like I guess harmonic fill the guitar is doing, just like the notes I'm playing, is working with the drums to make this fourth beat really hit really hard. You know what I mean? And obviously, if you want to write more complicated drums, you can. I tend to actually, this part, I went all out for the drums over here. But the breakdown, it's really nice to not overthink it and just have fun with it. So it's repetitive, whatever. But yeah, like the idea of timing, it's kind of just following the kick pattern in that way, and the hits. So that's what I do. You can do it too. It's whatever. The next, I guess, major tip is the tone of everything. So I'll go through all my chains now, and I'll start with the guitar. So I'm a proud user of thall amp. This shit is awesome. I think this is my favorite amp sound in a plugin I've used. I haven't used Archetype Nolly, which I know a lot of people like, and I haven't used Gojira. I haven't used all like the ones people like to use, basically. So I can't speak on those, but I tried this one, and I like everything I can do with this. And I'll talk about what I can do with this, what I like to do with this, I mean, right now for the chain. So the gate, this is actually looser than what I usually like my gates to be at. I usually like to be at -25, so I like it usually to be pretty tight. That's kind of to help with the low end. I do low cuts and high cuts based off the mix, by the way, so don't take this as gospel. Anyway, but I like my gates to be relatively tight. The fuzz, I'm pretty sure I automated the fuzz to just come on for the breakdown and the thicken as well. So the low dirt is just an octave fuzz. I think it says it at the bottom there. It's basically just an octave fuzz, and so it makes the low end sound a lot fuller. And the thicken adds an octave above and below. It's basically a dual octaver. And so when you add those things, it just makes this guitar sound bigger. And it's nice that it's included in this plugin, because then I'd have to make different layers for that. And I guess technically I still could, but I'm not doing that shit. And you don't have to either if you use this. This is not an ad, obviously. If you want to make other layers, you just make a separate tone for low fuzz and for octaves. Or you can just re-record this in octaves. It's up to you. The nice thing about this octaver, though, it runs, it's not exactly an octaver pedal, if that's what you had in mind. That's kind of how I explained it. It's not. This whole chain is running in parallel with octaves, if that makes sense. So that's why there's this high cut here. You can kind of cut out the higher octave. You can cut out a lot of the noise, so it's not like super like abrasive. It's really nice in that way. So this is really nice. This is also this is like a transient machine. Basically it's a compressor that like clamps down at this frequency. I like to have it around 500 to 1K for like that really nice attack. especially when you're in lower tunings, it's really helpful to have. So, yeah, that's all of this. This is like the preference zone. I've seen people run this with 40 gain, like at 40%, and it still sounds good. Obviously, less gain is better for note clarity, so use it at your discretion. I like to keep it around 50, so it could be 40, 50, 60, but anything past like 70 is a little much for me, but just use judgment. This is like the root of the tone. Then it's running into a compressor for more attack. That's why the attack is so high. I really like transients in guitar. I also like Ableton stock plugins. So if you have something you'd prefer to use apart from these, you can do that. I don't care. And then I have it running into 2 EQs, and I'll kind of go over what's going on here, because it looks a little weird, but it's not. So these may seem a little weird, but all I'm doing, I'm cutting out frequencies that are fundamentals for other instruments. So like this is the snare fundamental. This is the fundamental for my bass VST, and this is the fundamental for the kick drum. It's just to give all those things more room, because this is a really thick tone. And then I'm scooping some low mids out. I'm boosting at 17K for more presence and pick attack. If you didn't notice, I kind of like pick attack in my tones. And then I'm just giving it some more high end before the high cut to make room for the vocals. And so this is like the main EQ. This EQ is mainly tone shaping. I'm getting rid of some of the extra hissy bits, like at 4K and at 5200 and 6200. And I've also done another low mid kind of cut, just because I don't want anything to be muddy, and I don't want it to be super harsh. So, and then this auto filter, I learned this trick from a hyperpop producer, and I like it more than sidechain compression, because that kind of attenuates the whole instrument, and I don't really want that. I just want it to get out of the way of the kick drum. And so this auto filter is set to like the fundamental frequency of the kick drum, and this envelope shows how much of it to get out of the way, so you can watch it. It's also getting the snare, but that's fine. But like you can kind of see it's getting out of the way as the kick hits, and you can keep everything else around that. I'm also doing that for the bass, which we'll segue to now. I use circuit bass because I don't want to buy gin bass right now. That's too much money, and I'm in college. That shit's evil. But this sounds fine. I'll solo this. So I like my bass and guitar to sound like one thing, and what I do to achieve that is I just run the bass through thall amp as well, and then I do EQ. So I'll go over my rationale for this. I'm pretty sure this is just the default gate at 50, but it's a VST, so you can kind of just turn it off and it's fine, but I didn't touch it. Obviously, you want the fuzz because that's what's going to help push the thickness. With this VST as well, it's kind of, when you're not playing like the open lowest string, for some reason, it gets kind of thin, and so I just have the thicken close to 60 to just give it more consistent rumble, because that's really what I want. And you can see the high cut's kind of crazy too for the parallel series. And then all of this is just like really low gain comparatively. I don't really like a super like twangy bass. Like I like enough of it for it to cut through, but you can tell like this is kind of dark. And so I have a boost at 1600 to get more pick attack. But like everything else I kind of don't want, so I've low passed it. I have a bump here, and I've cut it around the kick fundamental as well. so it's kind of out of the way of that. You could also put another high pass here at like 30, but like it's chill. Like I don't, no one cares. Like it's fine, especially since on your master you're probably gonna cut that shit anyway, so it's whatever. But I like to leave it because the rumble kind of adds to like the holistic effect of these two instruments together. And then drums. Let's talk about drums. So this is kind of dependent on what library you use. I know Modern Massive 2 is really popular, but that shit's also like $200, and not everyone wants that. So I use the Sleep Token drum library, which is like 150, but I think I got it on sale, so I probably only paid 100 for it, or I don't even know if it's been on sale. I don't remember how much I paid for this. I bought this a while ago, but this is what I use. I know Bogren Digital has like a pretty nice free plugin library. I think it's called Crim Drums, but I've used that in the past, and that sounds fine as well. So the downside of using that is like it has a free version that's you can use everything with, but like if you want to use like the EQ or like anything like that, or like any of the processing, you have to buy it. So if you don't care about that and you just want it for demos, you can get that. But I need the processing, and I just figured if I was gonna buy something, I was gonna buy a nicer library. So a lot of what makes a nice kit sound is knowing what you want, and that's in a lot of ways the hardest part of production, is knowing what you want. So I'll go through what I want, and then maybe that'll help you figure out what you want, and then you can apply that. So I like a really direct kick. And the nice thing about a lot of modern drum libraries is they have mic'd literally everything. They've done everything so meticulously that you can do whatever you want. So I like a really direct kick. So I've turned the overhead, the trash, and the room mics all the way down, and I've kind of adjusted these two mics to taste, and that makes this sound. Which is just about what I want. Similarly with my snare, I like a more roomy snare. I don't like snare bottom either. So I know I wanted a lot of snare top and I wanted a lot of room. So you can see I've adjusted the mics for that. Those are like the two main things I touch in a mix for drums. In a lot of ways, I'd say that's the most important, especially if you don't really use toms. But that's a nice starting point, is getting those things to sound the way you want. This also has some tape saturation, which I like. I have this at about 8 dB, and I've cut it around 18K. This just gives a nice bit of grit, especially to the cymbals, that helps it sit better and makes it more aggressive without being abrasive. As you can also see, there's built-in compression and EQ. I don't touch that because I like to have a little more control than what this offers. The only thing I'd really use this for is to turn down like some low mids if you're using a lot of toms, because these toms are kind of subby, and I don't love that. But I mean, you can also make like a tom bus and change that. But yeah, I also like for the overheads to be a little more laid back compared to the hi-hat. So like, especially when I'm playing the crash here. Notice this, even though these are hits and the velocity is higher, it is actually just louder than the China's. It's like noticeably quieter, and especially in a mix, like let me actually just play the drum part in the mix, and you can see the difference in the volume of the hi-hat versus the overhead stuff like the China. You see it's quite a bit quieter, and the reason for that is this is a preferential thing, obviously, but the overheads I kind of like to just fill the space without being super noticeable. And I think Sleep Token does this too quite a bit, where the cymbals are kind of just meant to fill that space, and you don't even really notice that they're being played, but they're there. And they've done that a lot on their new record, and I apparently that was my most listened to record, which is a little embarrassing last year. Um, but like I've noticed that, and I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea to be what's the most present, and so I want the section of the song to stand out as opposed to any particular instrument. And having everything kind of sound like one thing, like one unit, helps with that. And if that means that some things can't stick out, that's it is what it is. And making sure you are compressing everything as well together. I know a lot of newer people don't know like what to use compression with, or like what it even does. And most of the production, if you want something to sound good, most of the mixing can be done with a compressor plugin. Like I'd say probably you can get probably 70 or 80% there with just compression and EQ. If I don't know how encouraging that is, but making sure you have compression to glue everything together and making sure stuff isn't in each other's way. That's a pretty solid way to make sure your sound is not awful. The last thing to talk about is ambience. Ambience varies depending on the song, obviously. But most of the times you can get away with just using a synth. If you're like in a thall band or something, there's like that's its own video. Doing thall ambience it's like a whole other art. But for this mix and for most cases, you can probably just use a synth. And what you do with it is kind of up to you. With this song, I didn't want the synth to really be doing much. I just needed it to kind of fill the space. And so it's kind of just writing the chord that's implied by the riff. And as it changes, the chord also changes. So like it's that D sharp major chord, and then when I start playing F sharp, it plays F sharp, and then when we switch to Phrygian, it starts playing that interval. So I mean, you can kind of just let it follow the guitar, and then it'll sound good. But if you want to do something more interesting, you could probably turn it up and then make it more of a part of the song, and then that way it's filling both ambience and a role of an instrument. But it's up to you, whatever you want to do. This is what everything sounds like together. So yeah, one last thing. I'll go over my master chain in case anyone cares about that, and then we'll be done. What may be a little confusing to some people is I have mantra on my master, and I would be skeptical too. But I'll explain the reasoning. So, Gullfoss, I know Nolly uses it. I think that's a pretty it's a pretty significant change to how the song sounds. and I tried the Goldfoss free trial, and I really liked what it did to my mixes. But I don't really want to buy that plugin. I know Mantra and Goldfoss are the same price, but Mantra is they kind of serve completely different purposes, and for all intents and purposes, I needed Mantra more at the time. But what Goldfoss is essentially is just a dynamic EQ plugin, and Mantra has a dynamic EQ section. And the nice thing about Mantra is they kind of have these predetermined curves that you can select from that you will best fit your mix. And if you don't like any of them, you don't have to have Mantra on your chain, obviously. But the modern scooped one provides a pretty significant change. So do that what you will. You have to mess with these settings to get it to sit where you want it. I find these are the most consistently nice sounding. Obviously, this is a vocal plugin, and it's meant for vocals, so it's not going to be perfect, but I like it. You can do whatever you want with it. Compression, blah. And then this EQ, I'm cutting out quite a bit of low mids because I don't want it to sound like super congested or anything like that. And I've boosted a little bit of high mids, and I boosted 11K. And I mean, this is a pretty standard preset. Like you can use. I use this for most of my things. Well, the bump usually isn't this big, but like this general curve is like pretty applicable in most cases. And we have some stereo enhancement. It's not at 40% all the time because that'd be kind of insane. It's at 40% because this is the end of the song, and there's been a build up to this point, and this has actually been automated. I think it goes from 0 to 20, and then back to 0, then to 20, and then it goes from 0 to 40, and it stays at 40. But I don't like going past 40 with these. Stereo enhancement is a good way to have like a huge sound as well. So if you don't want to add more layers, or you can't quite hit it, maybe try that. I have it on my master. You don't have to have it on your master. You can put it on just like if you have a band bus, like an instrumental bus, you can just put it on that instead. Or I guess you could make a send for it if you want. That seems a little overkill and maybe a little hard, but you could know more than me. I'm relatively new to this anyway, but yeah, that's about all I have to say. So if this is helpful, let me know. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. Bye.